This is Christian Book Blurb, brought to you by author and songwriter Matt McChlery. Get a behind-the-scenes glimpse into the lives of some of your favourite Christian authors, hear about their books and faith. Also, why not check out my website, mattmcclery.com. Well, hello and welcome to this episode of the Christian Book Blurb, where we like to encourage you in your discipleship one book at a time as we meet some amazing Christian authors and learn about their books, their lives, and their faith. Well, I'm your host, Matt McChlery. Thanks so much for clicking over here and joining me today. Now, on today's show, I'm going to be talking about calling and destiny with the author P H Bray. So let's welcome Phil to the show. Hi, Phil.
Oh, hello, Matt. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, really good.
And as December has only just begun, I guess I can wish you a Merry Christmas. I think I'm allowed.
Absolutely. And a Merry Christmas to you too.
Thank you. And speaking of Christmas, I just wanted to let the listeners know that as we're at the start of December, I'm going to be easing us into the Christmas season very gently this year. And I'm speaking with P H Bray today about his novel that he's written called Search for the Healing Cloth. And it has some very gentle references to the Christmas story, but in a fictional setting. So, Philip, your story centers around the swaddling that was used to wrap Jesus in after his birth. Why did you choose this as your central theme?
Well, it started with I did a study on angels for a couple of years, and I did notice that during the nativity period, from really the conception of Jesus, right the way through that period, there was a huge amount of angelic activity. And it just made me think about it in a bit more detail. I'd never noticed it before, that if this is God's plan for the salvation of humankind, which I believe it is, then he would have to make sure that it happened and there was sufficient safeguards to make sure that Jesus was born and survived long enough to be able to accomplish his mission. And therefore, I think that if you were behind the scenes of the Nativity in that spiritual world, there would have been a massive amount of angelic activity. So that was the trigger point for it at the beginning. And whilst I was looking at that in more detail, the Magi came into view. And it seems such a strange thing because the Magi appear on the scene. It's almost a cameo appearance and disappear very quickly. And so I decided to do some research into the Magi. Whilst I was doing that research, I came across this odd gospel, the first gospel of the infancy of Jesus Christ. It didn't make it into the Bible for a very good reason, probably written by the Gnostics. And some people think it may have even been written by Caiaphas, the high priest. So that started me searching a bit more. And in this gospel, of course, Magi present their three gifts to Mary, the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And she says to them, instead of a blessing, I present you with this gift, and gives them a piece of the swaddling, which is a nice story. Then on their journey home, they discover it actually has healing power and is indestructible. They drop it in a fire at one point and it doesn't burn, it doesn't even scorch. And I remember thinking at one point, just imagine if that was a true story, if that gospel was true, and there may be there are elements of it that are true, then what would that be like if you discovered it today? And this whole question really then about, well, if you had the power of that swaddling cloth to heal, who would you heal? And perhaps more importantly, who wouldn't you? How would you choose? So that was the beginning of it, really, and that's why it is a novel.
And it's interesting, kind of the writings you stumble across as you research certain topics. Speaking of Christmas and babies, your book, Search for Healing Cloth, it isn't a childish book, nor is it cliched. I think it's very well written. I've just finished reading it myself, and I find it very fast-paced and modern. There's all sorts of things going on in there, just for the listeners, so that there's drones buzzing around, there's militias and car chases and all sorts of interesting things going on. It reminded me a little bit of the style of Dan Brown's writing. You know, the Da Vinci Code guy, and he wrote lots of other books as well. Yeah, it's sort of an adventure and a quest set in a modern setting. What informed your decision to set it and sort of write it in this kind of style?
Well, it's interesting. You're right. One of the publishers that I contacted with it described it as a cross between Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, that came to mind as well, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah.
There's a bit of that about it. And it started off really just the behind the scenes with that nativity period, and kept switching over to the Magi. And the first edit I had was by Mark Stibbe, well-known author, and he said he thought it was actually 2 books. And so I didn't do anything for about 18 months. I was quite taken back by it. But in the end, I agreed with him and then turned it into 2 separate books. And you've read the second book in the series. So it's a trilogy. And the first one is The Making of the Magi. And the second one is Search for the Healing Cloth. And they're both completed. And the third book is part way through now. That's called The American Decision, or will be. So I think about God of the long game, and we often in our prayers it's about now and tomorrow and it's a very near future thing, but this is about the God of the long game, whereby 2,000 years is just the blink of an eye to him. So the kind of story developed along those lines, really.
You've already answered a question I was going to ask you later about the series and which order this book fell in the series and things. So that's great. Thank you for that. I need to now read the first one to fill in some of the stuff. But it stands alone as a great book as well, just so listeners know. Yeah, it was really good.
It has had good reviews. People do say they can't put it down.
Very fast paced. I love it. Melody, the central character of the novel, she feels that she's called to uncover the Swaddling, and it's been hidden for centuries. So I just wanted to look at with you, if you don't mind, the whole idea and understanding of calling. And maybe even possibly destiny. How does calling work? What is calling?
I know I've heard people preach on this many times, and it's really difficult. We're all called to be a witness. That's the first thing. Whether we're a good witness or a poor witness, that's another matter. But we're all called to be a witness. Sometimes we're called to do specific things, I think, for a particular period of time. I was called into youth work for 15 years, for a season, as it were. I think sometimes we're called to do something for a season. Sometimes it can be quite dramatic for some people. Other times, I think you've just got to step out in faith and test the water. If you feel called to do something, to just step out and try that, because God will equip you if it really is a genuine calling. So that's how I feel about calling.
And is it similar to destiny, or is destiny something else?
Yes, I don't. That word destiny, it feels very secular. The word destiny somehow, doesn't it? Whereas calling feels much more pious. I'm not. Melody tries to explain, I think, at one point, she's talking to a professor and he asks her, why is she so obsessed with it? And she rebukes him, saying that that's such a negative way of looking at it, that she feels that this is her destiny, that she's called to do this. No, more than that, she says at one point, I was chosen. And again, this fits into that God of the long game, that you've kind of been chosen to do this. Even before you were born, sometimes people are. So it's a really deep and complicated issue, calling, isn't it? And Melody feels that. And it's reinforced by the fact that she has these visions from quite a young age. The visions are quite troublesome at one point in her younger years. But as she gets older, she feels that this is actually a calling, that she has these visions because she's been called to find the Swaddling.
How do we know that the great idea in our head is a little bit more than just a great idea? Because I felt called to things in the past myself, and I start off having lots of great ideas, and lots of those ideas don't really go anywhere, or I try it out and, there wasn't anything really to it. It was just, a passing fleeting fancy type thing. But then some of the things actually start to grow and develop. And then I start to think, actually, and through a lot of prayer and seeking God, start to come to see, actually, I might be called to this. Is that a similar thing in your experience, or is it a bit different for you?
No, it's very similar. And I think what happens is that God puts things in place. I had no thought about youth work at all. And then the a new curate, came to speak to me and said, "Look, I think you'd do really well in youth work." And so that made me start to think, and I think that's what God does. He has these kind of trigger points that make you then think about it. And if he doesn't put a stumbling block in the way, then I think you can just keep pushing at that door. If it slams shut, then it probably isn't a calling at all. But I think if you just keep pushing at it, and God keeps opening that door more and more by presenting opportunities, then I think that's been my experience.
That's helpful. Yeah, thank you. Your story is very well presented, and it's apparent that you've done lots of research into the topic, including the Magi, or some people call them the wise men, which we talk about and sing about and have printed on Christmas cards and all sorts of things at this time of year. How much research did you actually do?
There's a huge amount of research. I mean, it's taken 9 years.
Wow.
Which is a long time. And of course, it would be almost impossible to visit some of these places. I mean, Iran, for instance, that'd be very difficult to visit. It covers so many different countries that
it does. It
has been researched, and most of the detail is accurate. So, for instance, when they catch the ferry is actually called Korag. And there is a ferry, and it does run across the Caspian Sea. So the detail is there, and it's taken a long time to gather it.
And you kind of alluded to the fact that you've actually visited some of the places mentioned. Is that accurate, or is it just lots of trawling through Google Maps and tourist handbooks to try and figure out road names and that sort of thing? Because it reads like, you've been actually there.
It does, doesn't it? Yes. No, I haven't been there, but it is very accurate, and there has been a huge amount of research done into it. Yes.
Oh, interesting. And would you like to visit some of the countries you've written about?
Yes, that is on my wish list now, my bucket list.
Every country, or is there a specific one?
Well, I haven't been to the Holy Lands anyway, and so I think that's the first one on the bucket list, as it were.
So with these 3 books, I know you're still in the process of writing. Are you still writing the third one, or has it been written but it's now being edited? What kind of stage are you at with that?
No, it's about probably about halfway through, so it's not at the editing stage yet. The first one is complete, and it'll depend on how successful this is. Really, I think about whether the publisher will want to print the next one.
Remind us of the two titles that are already out.
The first one will be called The Making of the Magi. The one that's we're talking about now, of course, is Search for the Healing Cloth. And the third one will be called The American Decision.
Yeah, that's great. So if people search for those, they should be able to find some of them to buy. Anyway, I was going to be saying that I enjoyed it so much. I was wondering if you still have the film rights for the story, because I think we made a great film.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wonder if it might make a better Netflix series.
Something like that.
It would be a really good film. Someone asked me about it, and I said I think it would actually make a better film than it makes a book. But,
yeah, it works well as a book. I think it works really well.
It does.
I really enjoyed it.
It has had really good reviews, and you never know, do you? It's there is an element of luck about it, the right person picking up at the right time. And so I've just really handed this over to God.
If you're listening to this podcast, I can highly recommend the Swaddling Search for the Healing Cloth by P H Bray. If you're looking for a fast-paced action adventure as you kind of travel through the Christmas season, with a very slight nod to Christmas, but not too sparkly. It's quite gritty in places. Do go and check out the Swaddling Search for Healing Cloth. I don't think you'll regret it. If you're into fast-paced action fiction, you're going to love it. So do grab yourself a copy. We are going to be back chatting with P H Bray a little bit more about his life and his faith just after these. So stay tuned.
If you enjoy listening to this podcast, you can help keep it on the web. All you've got to do is buy me a coffee. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/Matt McChlery to make a donation. There is a link in this episode's show notes. So go on, buy me a coffee today and help this podcast to keep supporting Christian books and authors.
Hello, welcome back to the Christian Book Blurb. We are chatting with the author P H Bray, and before the break we've been chatting about his series of novels called the Swaddling series, and we were talking specifically about the second book in that trilogy called Search for the Healing Cloth. Now, Phil, what we like to do in this part of the podcast is get to know the author a little better. So I'll start off. What do you do for fun?
Yeah, good. That's a good question, isn't it? And it's varied over the years, I think. I mean, I've got quite a large collection. I'm a bit of a philatelist. So I've got a lot of stamps in my collection. So that's one thing. Tend to spend a lot of time with grandchildren. Mm-hmm. That's probably my greatest joy at the moment. I've got three sons. I was going to say I had three sons. I've still got three sons. We had three boys, and so when the granddaughters came along, it was a bit of a shock to the system. They were just so different. So we spend quite some time with the grandchildren.
That's great. And you mentioned stamp collecting earlier. What would you say is the rarest stamp you have in your collection, or the most valuable, maybe?
Well, the penny black, the first one that was introduced in 1840. Yeah. And because they were stamping it with a black, what they call the Maltese cross, it was very hard to see at times. And so eventually they went to the penny red. And each plate has a number. So it would start at 1, and then eventually they would break or they would wear, and they'd replace it. And each time they replaced the plate, they would put a fresh number on it. And you need a magnifying glass to see it on each stamp, but it is there. And there are 220 plates. And I've got 218 of them, of the stamps.
218 of the plates?
18 of the penny reds.
I see. Okay. Wow. That's amazing.
The two that I haven't got, they think that one of them, the plate broke on the first day. And so not many went into circulation. And so they think there's only probably 6 copies in the world.
My goodness.
I can't imagine how much it'd cost to buy one of them.
Yeah, fortune. I saw something about a stamp selling for millions the other day on a news program.
Yes, there are some really rare stamps.
You have to write a few more books to buy one of those stamps.
Yeah, I certainly would, yeah.
You mentioned that you retired, and that also it taken you 9 years of research to put these books together. Do you have time to do anything else?
Well, actually, I haven't completely retired. I still do some training for Royal Mail. So if you want to become a postie, then you'd have to have a half-day driving induction course.
Okay, interesting.
To make sure that you are safe on the road.
So have you worked with the post office for a long while?
No, I don't work for the post office.
Right. I was just thinking your interest of stamps and sort of your connections.
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? No, I was a driving instructor for quite a period of time.
Okay.
And then I went into fleet training, so that's where I get called in.
Okay, I see. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Have you got any favourite things to eat?
Probably my wife's chicken tray bake is to die for. It's just so good. That would probably be, and then second on the list would probably be something like sausage and mash with onion gravy. That kind of. I like
nice.
that kind of food. Stodgy food. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And we were talking about Netflix earlier and how that we think these novels will make a great Netflix series. What are you watching on Netflix or other platforms at the minute?
I quite like to watch animations. So I'm a big fan of things like Toy Story, the Despicable Me series, and they really get me. I enjoy those a lot. I'd spend a lot of time watching documentaries, wildlife documentaries.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, it drives my wife mad. But she's had 55 years of marriage to me too. Yeah.
When we watch documentaries, wildlife documentaries at my house, we're so used to hearing David Attenborough's voiceover that when it's somebody else doing it, it feels rather weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. Someone else voicing over a wildlife documentary, you think, oh, this doesn't seem quite right. I don't know. Do you get the same kind of feeling, or you're not too bothered who's narrating it?
No, exactly. I don't feel exactly the same. And it's interesting because that Asia one has just come out.
Yeah.
And I saw the first one the other night, and it's fabulous. Of course, he doesn't visit the places anymore. He just does the voice.
Just does the voices. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Oh, very interesting. Thank you. Now, we've already talked about what you've got coming up soon. This is the third book you're working on. So, yeah, I really hope it comes to life because it will help to round off the trilogy really nicely. Where can we find your books to buy? If anyone's interested in buying a copy of Search for Healing Cloth or The Making of the Magi, where can they get it from?
Yes, you can't get The Making of the Magi yet. It'll depend on the success of the Search for the Healing Cloth as to whether...
So that's the only one you can get at the minute. Okay.
Yes,
right.
And the publisher is Malcolm Down. So you can go to their website, www.malcolmdown.co.uk. You can get it on Amazon. It's available as well online at Waterstones. Eden Books, they do it as well. Mm-hmm. Or you could visit my website, which it's quite a simple one. It's www.theswaddling.com.
Okay, that's great.
If you visit my website, you can buy it there, and you'd get a signed copy as well if you went to my website.
Yeah, and I know that author sales is often better for the author as well. So, yes, what I'll do is I'll put a link to that website, your website, in the show notes of the episode so people can click over there and get themselves a copy. I would really like to see book 2 and book 3 of the trilogy made. So I'm really going to encourage people to grab themselves a copy of your book, The Swaddling Search for the Healing Cloth. So do go ahead and have a look at that, especially over Christmas time, because, you know, it all kind of fits together. So that'll be really good. Well, Phil, thank you so much for giving up your time today and joining me on the Christian Book Blurb. It's been fantastic chatting with you.
Thank you, Matt. It's really been, I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Phil. And thank you as well to everyone who's been listening to this episode. Don't forget, we'll be back again really soon with another episode of the Christian Book Blurb, because it comes out on the 1st and the 15th of every month. So I'll be back again really soon, speaking to another great Christian author all about their books, their life, and their faith. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to the pleasure of your company again really soon. Thank you, and goodbye.